they will go on a gold standard, of that I'm convinced. And when they do, just so that everybody understands what this means, it means that Russian institutions, Russian banks, Chinese banks, banks in the Middle East, and so on and so forth, can go into Western markets, buy gold where the lease rate is 2%, sell it to the Reserve Bank the Central Bank of Russia, where the return currently is 16%. And because it will be tied to gold, it's like being paid 16% in gold. That's the way in which you build reserves. That is the role of interest rates, not trying to manage an economy, which is always a disaster.
Since the invasion of Ukraine, Russia has faced profound geopolitical and economic changes. The EU, US, UK, and G7 have imposed complex sanctions to weaken Russia's economy by restricting access to international markets, financial systems, and technology. However, countries like India and China have not supported these sanctions and have become key markets for Russia instead. This shift has allowed Russia to mitigate the impact of Western sanctions by focusing on Asian markets, significantly influencing global commodity markets, and showcasing Russia's resilience and adaptability. Economically, Russia has performed remarkably well despite the ongoing conflict and the sanctions imposed by Western nations. Alasdair Macleod highlights that one of the central challenges for the Russian economy has been maintaining the ruble's value. The Central Bank of Russia has responded to this challenge by setting high interest rates, around 16%, to prevent the ruble from depreciating. This high interest rate reflects a lack of confidence in the ruble rather than fundamental economic weaknesses. Alasdair predicts that Russia will likely adopt a gold standard in the near future. Such a move would allow Russian and allied banks to purchase gold at lower interest rates in Western markets and sell it to the Central Bank of Russia at higher returns. This strategy would enable these institutions to earn significant profits in gold, thereby bolstering Russia's financial reserves and enhancing its economic stability. The BRICS nations are also actively discussing a new trade settlement currency backed by gold. This proposed currency would likely consist of 40% gold and 60% other currencies, requiring a shift to a gold standard for effective operation. If implemented, this could lead to the widespread adoption of gold standards throughout Asia, fundamentally altering the global economic landscape. The adoption of gold standards by Russia and other BRICS nations could weaken Western financial dominance, creating a more balanced global economic order. Alasdair suggests this shift would enhance economic stability for these nations and reduce Western financial influence. We will present clips from Alasdair Macleod's interview, but before we do, if you want more videos like this, please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell for more updates. Thank you, and enjoy the video.
Well, as we discovered with South Africa in the apartheid days, when the world introduced sanctions against South Africa, the inventive people in South Africa developed new technologies and everything to get, to deal with the problem. And the sanctions just didn't work. I mean, it just hit everybody else. And this is exactly what's happened with Russia. Now, I actually don't think Russia gives two hoots that they've lost all those dollars. I mean, because, the US has defaulted on its obligations. Let's face it, that's what's happened. They'll make a bit of noise about it. Of course they will. But from the Russians' point of view, this is sending a signal to all their partners. And we're talking about 60%, or nations representing 60% of the world's population now, 35% of the world's GDP by purchasing power parity. That the Americans, basically, they will steal from you. And a lot of these nations also know that unless they kowtow to the Americans, there might be a revolution or, some sort of regime change forced upon them or whatever. So, I mean, there is a fear of the Americans, but that fear is being broken now by the fact that Russia, in conjunction with China, are, if you like, a viable home for all these nations who are, if you like, sick of the colonialism, if you like, of the West. The difference between a fiat currency and one which is actually on a gold standard. With the fiat currency, it depends on faith. That is the watchword, not quantity. though that does come into it, let's face it. If you're unfashionable, if you're out of fashion, you got a problem. and that's why it's 16% interest rates in Russia. They will go on a gold standard, of that I'm convinced. And when they do, just so that everybody understands what this means, it means that Russian institutions, Russian banks, Chinese banks, banks in the Middle East, and so on and so forth, can go into Western markets, buy gold where the lease rate is 2%, sell it to the Reserve Bank the Central Bank of Russia, where the return currently is 16%. And because it will be tied to gold, it's like being paid 16% in gold. That's the way in which you build reserves. That is the role of interest rates, not trying to manage an economy, which is always a disaster. So they are in a very strong position. And, I think the fact that they haven't actually gone onto a gold standard yet is because India doesn't want it. The Chinese have a different approach to this sort of thing. As far as they're concerned, they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to be blamed for collapsing the West and so on and so forth. But as soon as someone like Russia goes on a gold standard, we are toast. I mean, it's as simple as that. So, and they're also talking about this. I understand that, the agenda for the BRICS meeting in, Astana, or wherever it's called itself, back in October, the Russians are going to be putting, or they're going to attempt again to put the trade settlement currency backed by gold. Presumably, I mean, the word is a mixture of gold, 40% gold, 60% currencies. But they'd have to go onto a gold standard. I mean, this is the point everybody misses. So we could well have gold standards throughout Asia by October or shortly thereafter. This is an interesting situation. So how's that to start off?
China's erosion of the petrodollar foundation and increasing control over key commodities raises critical questions about the stability of the US-led financial system. Despite China's significant economic prowess, including surpassing US manufacturing capacity and holding the second largest global economy status, challenges remain in establishing a credible alternative monetary system that garners worldwide confidence. In contrast, the United States maintains leadership in liberal democratic values, but faces internal challenges amid political polarization and societal division. In his 2021 book, Ray Dalio warns about the erosion of legal and social foundations underpinning the dollar, exacerbated by public overspending, mounting debts, and inflationary pressures. Amidst Western disunity in crafting a cohesive global strategy, China and its BRICS allies are expanding their influence. BRICS nations see their collective strength as a counterweight to the long-standing US-dominated economic order. Alasdair Macleod points out that the era of fiat currencies is nearing its end due to inherent instability and continual devaluation. With a significant portion of the workforce living paycheck to paycheck and vulnerable to economic shocks, the credibility of fiat money diminishes as central banks dilute currencies to meet growing obligations. This ongoing erosion signals a need to transition towards a more stable and dependable global monetary system.
I mean, the problem with this, of course, is that, quite some time ago, I saw a statistic that 70% of the employed workforce lives paycheck to paycheck. In other words, they don't have any savings. They can't put anything aside. Mm. And that makes it even worse because, rising interest rates, rising mortgage rates and all the rest of it, it's already squeezing them very, very badly. I mean, as to your point about people getting behind on their mortgage payments, it's going to become a question, I think, of, individuals are going to have to manage the relationships with their building societies and all the rest of it. I mean, building societies and banks, as you rightly point out, are going to be constructive on this. I mean, it's the old story, owe £100 to the bank and, you've got a problem. Owe £1 million to the bank and the bank's got a problem. That's really what that's what it boils down to, with everybody being in the same boat. They're going to, the way to manage this is don't just, but get into a dialogue with the bank, because the bank or the building society will recognize it has got a problem. It will not want to foreclose. That is the last resort. And, when this begins to snowball into even greater numbers, it's not even going to be a last resort. The whole system will have to be underwritten by the government, in effect. That, of course, leads to the dilution of the purchasing power of the currency. I mean, the liabilities coming down the road are just increasing all the time. But this is, if you're going to keep the roof over your own head, I think you're going to have to think seriously about your relationship with, your bank, your mortgage provider, whatever. But that is rather beyond us. I mean, we're just talking about an economic scenario which we can already see is beginning to arise. But for those who can afford to do it, who don't have these obligations, I think there is an increasing urgency in order to get out of credit as much as possible. And credit is not just a bank deposit. I actually don't worry about bank deposits. I mean, you've got money, if you've got currency sitting in, say, NatWest Bank, which is half government owned anyway, that's not going to go bust. They're going to do anything they can to stop banks going bust. Let's face it. So, but the problem is the currency. The currency is credit. It is an obligation which is owed to you by the central bank. Now, I mean, I have economists, even Austrian economists, who don't actually understand that point. They think that the currency has actually replaced gold as money, and consequently, they ignore the fact that there is a balance sheet entry on a central bank's balance sheet which shows currency as a liability. A liability to who? To you and I, to the extent that we own the currency. So that is credit. It is credit with a counterparty, and that counterparty is going to dilute your currency because of the obligations which that counterparty now has. This is going to be, it's whichever way you go, it is destructive of fiat currencies, and it is the ending of the fiat currency era hoving into view.
The global financial landscape may shift if Russia moves towards a gold standard. Such a decision could strengthen the ruble, stabilize global commodity markets, and reduce reliance on fiat currencies, challenging the dominance of the US dollar. This move could enhance Russia's economic stability while prompting broader discussions about the future of monetary systems worldwide. Share your thoughts on Alasdair's prediction in the comments section below. Also, ensure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Until next time.